Alright, so the next module we're going to be talking about is archetypes in literature. So archetypes are very prevalent in literature because they are known to be universal symbols. So this basically means they mean the same thing throughout all pieces of literature. So for example, white is a very popular one. So I could say this white ribbon would mean purity, any type of white, and somebody else can say this white shoe, this white bow, something else, but they all mean purity and innocence, even though they're different objects and even though they're in different pieces of work. But yes. So other than white, meaning purity and innocence, there are also other examples. So most of the examples I'm gonna say are just the examples that are gonna be in the story that I'm gonna show you later. But so we have white meaning purity and innocence, gray meaning lifelessness and decay, red meaning passion and sometimes violence depending on the situation. An animal would be like a snake, a serpent, typically mean evil and just not good. Pink could be femininity and innocence as well, and black is of course destruction and death, because everybody, when you think of black, it's just destruction and death. So yeah. So where can we see these archetypes being used? So in the story The Lady with the Dog, we can see some archetypes being used. Mainly archetypes with colors are the ones that I found and the ones that we'll talk about. But yeah, so quickly again, we read this a little while ago. So we're just going to quickly go over the main points or a little summary. So The Lady with the Dog is about a man and a woman that meet in Yalta while she is walking her dog. And then, so the man is named Dmitry Gurov, and then the woman is named Anna, it's hard to pronounce her name, but Sergeyevna, sorry. But yeah, both of them are married, and even though Gurov is married, he still messes around with a lot of girls. He has a lot of affairs. He's just a player, and yeah, he despises his wife. He's over his old life, so he's kind of like using women kind of to I don't know, fulfill his sadness and emptiness in his other life. But yeah, so once they get there, they meet and then they enter an affair, and right away Anna feels very terrible about it. She feels very gross, and she feels like she has lost her innocence, her purity, everything. So yeah, and then so Gurov, he's done this so many times before. He's had affairs so many times before. So he kind of just whatever about it. So once they return home, so they were in Yalta, which is not where they live. So Dmitry lives in Moscow, and Anna lives somewhere else. And once they go back home, Gurov is keeps thinking about her and is still she's still in his mind, which is very surprising for Gurov because, as I said earlier, he's done this so many times before. And so he eventually goes and finds her, and she sees him, and she's very mortified because she's with her husband, and she's kind of like, you guys, you need to leave, and he's like, okay, but only if you promise to visit me. So she's like, okay. So she starts to visit Moscow where he lives, and they continue the affair, and they realize that they're both in love, but they can't really do anything about it because they're also both married. So yeah. So for here, Anton Chekhov, the writer, he uses colors as a form of archetypes in The Lady with the Dog. So first of all, the Pomeranian dog that Anna had was white. So as we said earlier, white represents innocence and purity. And in the beginning of the story, when they met, the dog is around, and we see the dog a lot. But after they have the affair, we don't really see the dog as much, and so we don't really see the dog as much. And I took this as since her dog is gone, which is white, purity, innocence, after the affair, she obviously kind of lost that because she had an affair. So that is why you don't really see the dog as much. But yeah. So also another archetype, or another color archetype, was when Gurov goes to Anna's house and stays outside of her fence, and he describes the fence as being a long gray fence adorned with nails. So the color gray, as we said earlier, can represent like dullness, lifelessness. He really feels like this thing keeping them separated basically is just like, it's sorrow, it's sadness, because it's keeping them separated and it's keeping him from like his love of his life or whatever. So that is when he realizes, like, that is how he like sees the fence. Also, when he looks into the mirror, I believe, he sees that his hair is turning gray, and again, that means lifelessness, dullness. You can just see how like he's just very like a very sad person, and how he's aged, obviously. So yeah, these are just some archetypes in The Lady with the Dog to help you really understand how these archetypes are being used and how they're really universal. Because if, as they wrote here, it's a white dog, and in my other ones, if another writer writes using white, it doesn't have to be a white dog, but it still can mean innocence and purity. If somebody's wearing a white dress, they have a white bow in their hair, it could still mean the innocence and purity without actually having to be the same objects. So universally, that it just means, white just means innocence, purity. So